Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Karen Smith, positive psychology practitioner and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Micah Nyhouse, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back to our show, and today I'm so excited to be introducing Nawal Mustafa. Nawal is a neuropsychologist, a PhD candidate, mental health educator and cognitive neuroscience researcher. She's passionate about empowering people with the knowledge and tools necessary to enhance their psychological health. Her clinical interests include nervous system regulation, cognitive health, and emotional intelligence, ensuring a holistic approach to mental wellness. With years of experience in the field, Nawal has dedicated her career to understanding the intricate workings of the brain and mind. Her research and educational endeavours are driven by a commitment to promoting mental health and well-being. She integrates scientific insights with practical applications, making her guidance both accessible and transformative. Her Instagram journey has also been nothing short of incredible to watch, when Nawal has amassed more than 1.6 million followers today. Nawal, we are so stoked to have you here today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. And what a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for that. I'm excited to have a conversation about, some of the things that have led me to where I'm at this point. So very excited.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I would love to dive right in with you. I've watched your journey on Instagram almost from the beginning. It's been absolutely incredible, and also to see you grow and to see your content evolve as you've gone through your PhD as well. Do you want to share with us what inspired you to start on the journey of becoming a clinical neuropsychologist, but also with Instagram, sharing your knowledge there?
Yeah, I think the Instagram social media presence was very much an accident. So that's a preface initially. I've always been interested in the human brain. So I noticed that those are the types of books I would be reading in high school. So I ended up doing a bachelor's in neuroscience for my undergrad. And then I started asking questions to graduate students, figuring out what is a career that would really align with my interests. And that's why I ended up applying to clinical neuropsychology. So it's a MA PhD combined program. And I think once I was finishing my master's, I was like, okay, so I need to have a career after I graduate. And there are, at this point in the world, we don't send out pamphlets to kind of share our practice. We need to have an online presence, whether it's a website or, a social media presence, so people can kind of get familiar with you and then say, okay, I think I like this person, I'm going to go get their services. So I was like, maybe I can start a bit of a page on Instagram just to show that and just share what I'm learning onto this page. And it sort of blew up very fast. I think within 6 months, I had more than 120K, which I don't think was normal. I thought maybe I'll have 2,000-3,000 people by the time I graduate. And so people know that, okay, this is a legitimate page and I can get some clients in. But this has turned into a full-fledged career, which I'm very, very grateful for. But it's been a very interesting journey to get to this point. Obviously, when you start seeing, growth come in, you start to think about, okay, how can we figure out ways to get creative and try new ventures and projects within this domain. But yeah, that's how it kind of started. It was never intentional for me to be a content creator or an influencer per se. Even now, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with that term.
That is, a fascinating little journey, and I'm sure many of our listeners are going, what
What were some of those early posts as well? Like, what kickstarted things? Because for a lot of our listeners, and we're going to have a lot of people that are probably very early on in their journey of trying to build their presence. I'm wondering if you're happy to share maybe what was sort of your style, and how would you say it maybe evolved a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the things that I did once I realized, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to start posting. I think one of the biggest barriers that even now some of my friends who are psychologists, they're in the field and they want to also scale on social media. There's a nervousness about what friends and family would think once you start posting, information and maybe being a little bit more vulnerable online. And what I did was I just posted on my story on my personal account, hey guys, I'm starting this. So if you want to follow along. So that took away some of that stressor of like, maybe they'll end up finding me, because now I've taken the power back and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, take it or leave it, follow me if you want. And another thing that I really did was I'm going to post every single day for 90 days. And I did not budge from that. I didn't make excuses. And I told myself, this is something that I saw in a YouTuber that I really actually admire, Ali Abdal. He always talks about that when you're starting a new project or posting on social media, whether it be YouTube or, I took that as an Instagram aspiration. But just think of your first 100 posts, for example, to be absolute crap. Like, they don't need to be good. You just need to start maintaining consistency. They don't need to be the most perfect, beautiful post with the, most engaging caption and the most engaging title. You just need to get started, get that momentum going, and you'll learn along the way. And that's exactly what I experienced myself too. So I feel like those two tips are really important to get started with, in my opinion.
I love that. And that actually makes me go, okay, was there anywhere along that journey where you were sort of questioning any of what you're doing and whether or not it was sort of like the right decision?
I think there's always a balance when you're on social media to maintain integrity in your work and also follow ethical guidelines, especially as a psychologist or a mental health professional, medical professional. We need to uphold a certain standard. And so I feel very uncomfortable. And there have been times where maybe I've posted something and then after the fact realized, oh, there are some nuances to this information, and I'll take accountability for it. And I'll say, hey guys, I'm so sorry. Like, there's this added component. Didn't mean to mislead you, but that's where I start to fear, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing to be talking about this topic? But I think there's a lot of internal dialogue that, goes back to, well, at the end of the day, this is my level of expertise. This is my niche, like this is what I've been trained in. So it's okay for me to still try even after making this slight mistake. But there's a lot of fear of, I just want to make sure everything's evidence-based or at least based on professional opinion and judgment, not just a random thing that's a trend right now, like pop psychology. Yeah.
And it's so hard, isn't it? Because you can't possibly always be on top of every single piece of literature, and you can't possibly ever give enough context within an Instagram post to, have that calm mind. But I think it's exactly what you're saying. The best we can do is to uphold a certain ethical standard, be responsible, accountable for, maybe sometimes being a little bit off. It's interesting, this sort of, it's a new skill that needs to be learned, isn't it, to deal with that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I tell myself this exact thing when I do face something like this, where it's like, it is impossible for us to know everything with up-to-date information, with the most latest evidence for it. So it's okay to have a dialogue about it, which is what is happening in the research world itself. There is differing opinions all the time, right? So
yeah, exactly. And at least already you're having that inner monologue. I guess, that is already a very good sign. So many people these days on socials wouldn't even question or flinch, so I think that is so important. Can I ask for a second? Obviously, you're talking about your Instagram or your social media journey there, but in terms of your actual profession. And you said, you were always interested in the human mind and the brain and so forth. Is there anything in particular in clinical neuropsych that you're interested in?
Yeah, so I have gotten a lot of training in hospital-based settings in neuropsych. So I'm very much specialized in neuropsych, which is it's clinical psychology, right, where you can diagnose all these mental health disorders and so on. And then there's the neuropsychology aspect to it, where we start to look at brain disorders. So more of, dementia, acute brain rehabilitation, for example. So if someone gets an accident and they have brain damage, we're working in the hospitals beside their care team to test them and say, okay, your memory's impacted, your ability to orient yourself in space is impacted. So we test all of these things. And I feel like that has been my main interest in neuropsychology. It's not more, I loved learning about mental health disorders and understanding all of that, definitely. But the bread and butter of where my interests are neuropsychology within the hospital-based setting, predominantly geriatric, and I also really liked acute brain rehab. And then we ultimately either end up working in a hospital-based setting, or we can start our own clinic where, people are coming in. A lot of it is diagnosing ADHD, motor vehicle accidents, so what happens after, to the brain and how we can evaluate it and those types of things too. So there are a lot of opportunities for neuropsychologists in terms of career. And some of my friends who are now practicing as neuropsychologists, this career that I've kind of led myself into because of social media, really, it's another avenue now, because as a neuropsychologist, you can be on advisory roles on health apps and companies. You could start, being more in an educator role, which I'm doing now. So a lot of courses, workshops on evidence-based theories and knowledge on how to relieve some of the symptoms of certain mental health conditions with the neuro component included in it, even though I think all clinical psychologists or all psychologists, psychotherapists do have a lot of knowledge around this. So it's kind of like I'm in between creating this space, and my friends are like, you're kind of paving the way to a new career that we didn't even know existed for us, which is really cool to hear.
That's amazing.
And I love this, and I don't know if you're intentionally segueing us into our next line of question, but this notion of creating a new pathway and really paving the way for others is a pretty fascinating thing, I think, for us and our podcast and our listeners. Would you say that has there been any hurdles along the way, any real challenges along the way that have slowed down or maybe made you go, oh, maybe I need to pivot here? Or have you been pretty steadfast and everything's run smoothly and there's been no challenges and everything's just been, sunshine and butterflies?
Oh my gosh, can you imagine everything being sunshine and butterflies? Absolutely
can't.
Not. Absolutely not. There have been times where I had to, I would plan a project for months and then be like, no, this is too much. I have to kind of scale back, really think about it. And I think one of the biggest hurdles for me is sometimes I do feel like I'm in this alone, by myself, and I have to be an entrepreneur, a content creator, a psychologist. I'm wearing too many hats. And if I try to delegate, there's also this component, because as a leader and someone who has their own business, you want to start delegating. There's also that aspect of, can I trust this person? Can I partner with this person and actually feel like the end product, the outcome is going to be excellent still? Because I work a certain way. Will this person also work with this work ethic that I have? And there have been a lot of struggles because either things have not worked out because I can't delegate and I only have limited amount of time, or I'm starting something so brand new that no one's done it, where now I'm like, okay, is this going to be good enough, or are people going to be receptive to this? So A lot of hurdles, but I am happy with the journey, and I embrace all of these things as part of it. Like you can't avoid them.
Yeah. I can only imagine. And then obviously you have a certain level of expertise, a very high level of expertise. So it's like, if you're creating something for the very first time, it's not something that you can just palm off to someone either. It's not very easy to delegate either. You probably have to
Exactly.
run through it for the first time yourself. It can be very tricky. Is there anything in particular that you find that helps you as you navigate these challenges?
Right. Yeah. I think because so much comes in, so many people are trying to partner. You want to, like for me, I want to do my own courses and workshops, which is where most of my income, most of my business is from. So for me, I have to really figure out who to say no to and what projects to take on and prioritize, and just the rest are in the back burner because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with the freedom of how many things you can do at a time and how many opportunities you can take
Yeah.
on. So I have to be very selective. I don't have more than 3 projects running at a time. I don't have the capacity unless I had a team going for
Yeah.
me. But right now, a lot of it is contract based work that I hire into, and then otherwise it's just me working while still doing my dissertation. So it can be a lot.
Exactly. I was about to say, you're saying only 3 projects. That's like probably outside of your actual full-time career. That is very challenging as you're doing a PhD and you're working through your dissertation at the moment. I mean, that is a workload that, a lot of people struggle just navigating in and of itself. So, yeah, lots of kudos to you for even doing that. And can I just ask
Thank
one
you.
follow-up question there too? I know, Karen, you're very keen to come in with a question too. But do you have anyone to reach out to in terms of maybe some mentorship, someone who's walked maybe not in your particular career path, but, a different discipline, but in a similar way, anyone who can guide you, who you can ask for, I don't know, advice to help you navigate this journey?
Yeah, I think there's 2 types of support systems that I have. One is filled with people who genuinely care for my well-being. So these are really, close friends, loved ones, family members that really just have my best interest in mind. And luckily, both my parents are scientists, but they're also entrepreneurs. So I feel like they can give me some really good advice at times that, yeah, they don't understand the social media world, but they can give some advice around work ethic, around delegation, hiring, even just starting projects and so on, that I really take to heart, and I really apply that advice into what I do. And then there's this other
Amazing.
side of friends that I've met through social media who are in this space, and sometimes we'll just chat, we'll get on a call sometimes and just talk about our experiences. And that feels more of a support system where, a lot of, in my entire cohort, there's only, actually, I'm the only one in this social media space. So everyone is either working in a private practice or a hospital setting. And my practice is predominantly now virtual. And this is, I am taking it as seriously as a full-time career, right? So it's hard for me to relate to some of the things that they're doing. But with these other friends who are like psychologists, psychotherapists, even other health professionals who are on social media, they are creating content. It's really nice to feel like this is normal and this is supported by these people, and we're all kind of struggling with the same things. And I think that's a very important thing to have. Just that
Yeah.
we can mentor each other. I don't think there's a mentor that has that I have that has been so successful in a space where I'm like, okay, I want to get to that. I hope one day I have that type of mentor, but I think both, it's an equal like support between us, and I
It
really
is.
value that. Hmm.
Yeah, well, and that you've kind of answered the question that I was about to ask, but feel free to extend on it here a little bit because my question was going to be, you would have a wealth of knowledge and you would have an amazing access to a toolkit of resources that can help support people navigating daily challenges. I was wondering if there's any specific practices that you like to engage in, other than, I think, the social connection and sharing of struggles is really valuable. But is there anything else specifically? People, when we've asked this question, people talk about, like meditation or, taking time to engage in activities that they, move into a flow state with. But is there anything that you do as a bit of like a self-care routine or practice that really helps recharge your batteries? Because you've got a very busy schedule, so we're mindful that we need that time still.
Yeah, I do have a few non-negotiables. And I think when it comes to my own self-care, obviously they are non-negotiables, but sometimes, you fall off track, you come back on. But these are the types of things where if I miss a week of these things, I will be like, okay, Nawal, time to get back on track. I
Mm,
feel like it's very easy for me to have a chaotic brain and even get disorganized with my work and my routine if I don't have these non-negotiables. And one of them is just exercise. So I'll try to exercise at least 5 times a week, at least. And if I do it in the morning, I just feel so much more focused, so much clear in what I need to get done. And I think the endorphins initially, like starting my day with that, it allows me to get very pumped up for the day as well. So that's been a very key thing for me as self-care practice. Another thing that I do is journaling. And my journaling usually is around how I'm feeling, because there's a lot of pressure, and I feel like this pressure has increased as I've gained more following, because sometimes it feels like there are so many eyes on anything that I say or do that I want to just hide somewhere. Like it's just I feel very nervous
mm,
at times. I think because I don't have this extremely extroverted personality, extremely loud personality that is not shy, or I do feel like I don't like attention in crowds, and this is me in front of 1.6 plus million people trying to share something. So it can get very, very intimidating for me sometimes, because I know what I want to say. I know I have the knowledge, but showing up and not knowing who's watching, who's looking, can feel a little intimidating. So I
mm,
do journal to bring myself back into, okay, why is this important? It's helping certain people, and I appreciate these messages that I get on a daily basis. So I try to really
mm.
change that fear into more motivation through journaling. And it can only be like 5 to 10 minutes.
Beautiful.
It doesn't need to be anything wild. So that's my main journaling, but sometimes other things come up, and I'm, always trying to self-reflect and go into that. And then lastly, meditation. That's been a very important thing. I do struggle with consistency with meditation, but I'd say at least 3 times a week I'm still doing it. Anything spiritual for
Mm,
yourself. If you're not
yeah.
a religious person, it can be meditation, because you're just kind of going inwards and grounding yourself. I think it allows me to be more in the present just by doing a few 15, 20 minutes of meditation. Yeah, so those are my
Oh,
three
I was going to
non-negotiables
ask.
right now.
Amazing. Exercise, journaling, and meditating. I was just out of curiosity, would you be comfortable sharing a little bit more about your meditation practice? You just said already 15 to 20 minutes. Is there a particular type of meditation you do, or just pure sort of mindfulness?
So there are the way that I started meditation, actually initially I really struggled with it. I didn't know how to turn my brain off. Even sometimes now my thoughts are just everywhere. And one of the things that I thought was very helpful is, instead of criticizing, like, oh, I can't get rid of these thoughts in my mind, just allowing them to be. It's fine. I'm still trying my best to relax, and that's okay. And sometimes by just doing that, I can sort of let them just be there. This is a common advice that, you can watch your thoughts kind of floating by like clouds. And this is my way of just self-acceptance enough that, okay, you're fine. You're fine right here. I'm just still going to try. It helps me. But Insight Timer is an app that I started off with, and they have a lot of free meditations, free guided meditations. So when I was initially struggling, I needed that guided meditation from someone to just walk me through a practice. And it's based on emotions too. So you could have meditation for anxiety, meditation for self acceptance, and so on. So very helpful and free. So I was all for it. And now I really, really enjoy the open app as well. So I don't think I'm still comfortable sitting by myself in silence and meditating, but if there's meditative music and maybe someone even guiding me through it, it's very, very helpful. So those two apps I really love. Yeah.
That's beautiful, and I can totally relate also to the need, for something or someone to guide you through, because obviously as we meditate, it's like we really do turn that volume up inside, and if we already have this tendency to be a little bit anxious or something like that, we also turn up the volume of that. So being guided by something external that you can, just feel like you can ease into and, just relax into, I guess, can feel a lot more safe or relaxing in a way.
Yeah, it's someone's holding your hand, and it's great.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I love that too, and it's definitely something that I need a bit of a reminder of, because my meditation routine is the first thing that goes. Second to that is often exercise, so I'm glad that you mentioned both those things. But it does make me feel a bit better, because today I'm sitting here with my podcast t-shirt on, but my exercise gear on the bottom half ready to go after the podcast. So I'm feeling good about that bit of advice there for self-care. Well, you've had a beautiful journey, and it's been so amazing, like chatting and listening to and seeing the progression of your journey as well. As Michael mentioned at the start, it's been awesome to see the progression of your work. What would you say are maybe like 1, 2, maybe up to 3 pivotal moments in your career that have been quite defining, that now influence your future direction?
There's been a few. I think one of them was the first ever time I launched an online course. And this was me not having any idea what an online course is and how to create one, how to film one. There's a lot that goes into it, and then also how to market it, and hope that people will actually appreciate what I'm sharing with them in this course. So this was a very, very nerve-wracking thing for me initially, just the journey of understanding how to do all of this. I took a lot of courses on how to create an online course, with what camera to get for it, what microphone to get for it, how to film it, So a lot of tips and coaching that helped me with that. But once it launched and I saw how it was received by people, I understood the need of this type of information. And also, not just because it was more accessible than, say, therapy can be very expensive for people, but some people are too afraid to even go sign up for therapy, but they want to learn from somewhere. And because social media is new and the internet is fairly still new, there aren't a lot of online programs by licensed or just licensed experts or mental health professionals that have a depth of knowledge in this area. A lot of them there's a lot of noise they have to sift through, basically. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, there's a need for this, and it just fueled my passion to get more into this. So that was one of the big moments, because I was like, wow, okay, people are very interested and they want to learn. Like, this is something that is very much needed. And I think another pivotal moment was when I dealt with something very personal in my life, and it was to a point where I felt quite debilitated. There was internally I'm struggling. I was doing residency that year. So residency is a full-time hospital position. We go into different rotations. It's for clinical psychology, so it's only a year. But right when I entered, I started dealing with this personal issue, and it lasted the entire year. And I initially was, being in such a role where you're kind of high performing, you feel like you can get things done regardless, put that mask on, be confident, go to work, take care of your patients. And then I would come back home and I would feel exhausted because now, when you are not feeling your best and you try to put this mask on and you try to go in and maintain this persona, that's not who you are in that moment. You can't be yourself. So that takes a lot of brain power. That takes a lot of energy. So I would come home and it would be very hard for me to create content. I was noticing I was repurposing a lot of my posts from, 5 months ago that I posted and so on. And I think at that point I had to also understand that, yeah, there's momentum and there is this, there are a lot of things that you can do in terms of your work, but sometimes even when you're an entrepreneur or in a leadership position and you're going through something, you have to listen to yourself and your body and slow down a little bit and allow yourself to do that. Because I started noticing my output was not as excellent anymore. I didn't have enough, the way I like to have integrity in my work, that wasn't there anymore. And I was like, okay, I can't keep up with this pace anymore. I need to actually slow it down, and it's okay for me to do that. And that was a big lesson that I learned kind of forcefully, but I'm so glad that I did, because now I consistently monitor my internal headspace and energy levels to see, okay, where am I at now to be able to show up in front of all these people and create content. So those are, I think, the two main ones, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I sort of know, about what you're talking about. In terms of what did that look like in practice then for you, in terms of, monitoring your headspace, your energy levels, and being mindful and also respectful of that? Did you take some time off social media, or what did that look like in practice? Because if I think about myself, I probably just wouldn't have posted. Instagram is the first thing that goes.
Mm-hmm. It would have gone. I think it would have slowed down even more, but it was actually, honestly, residents don't get paid a lot. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in Canada and US, we don't get paid a lot. And, it's really unfortunate. One of my co-residents, she had to sell her car to be able to live in Vancouver. Vancouver is a very expensive city. So for me, I was very grateful that, one, these people that are willing to trust me with information that I share, and also if I create a course or a workshop, they actually want to learn from me. So that fueled it, but also I had to pay my rent as well, and I had to work because the resident pay was not even completing my rent for the year. So let alone groceries and, car insurance and whatever. So those tiny things, I think, made me feel like I had to work to an extent. But I slowed down. I made, I think, a quarter of what I had made the year before. So you can just imagine, I really slowed down. I talked to my director of clinical training, my residency, DCT, and he knew that I was going through this. And he offered support. He said, anytime you need to take time off, do it. And for me, the main thing that I was only focusing on that year was my patients that I was seeing in person at the hospital. Once I knew they were taken care of, in the best way possible by me, I was happy. And I was like, okay, now I can figure out how I can, what I can do with social media. And thankfully I'd saved enough that I just dipped into my savings that year. I think sometimes if you are struggling financially, it can be very hard to figure out where you can slow down. I had the privilege of being like, okay, I have some saved up. I'm still coming in with resident pay, but sometimes it can get so hard to figure out how to slow down. You have to prioritize your health over anything else when you're dealing with something internally. Otherwise, you're just not going to show up well in any area of life. So I had to do that, and I feel very happy that I was able to do that and just focus on my patients at my residency. Once it ended, then I went full mode in social media again.
Wow, yeah. I'm so grateful for you sharing all that. Thank you. I'm wondering, are there any particular life lessons or, any lessons that you would say you've learned that you would perhaps also pass on to someone going through something similar like that?
I think there's a lot of, when you deal with hardships that feel like you failed something in life. For me, for example, this uh, internally struggling and also struggling in a relationship that, I held on to my relationship for a very long time. We tried to work on things, and then I'm in this space where I talk about relationships, I talk about mental health. um, it's almost, there's a stigma that I should know how to improve. I should know how to take care of myself and get bounce back faster. It took me over a year to bounce back completely to myself, to where I feel proud and confident and energized again. So I think you have to really reframe what failure is to you, because this is one of those things where it is actually in your benefit to, if something is not serving you, you have to get out of it. You cannot keep repeating the same mistakes over and over, thinking it'll just get better next time. And it's that quote that comes to mind. Is it "fool me once," or no? What is it? A mistake? Okay, I can't even think of it. I'm not even gonna. Let's not talk
We'll
about
look it
this
up.
quote. It's
Yeah.
about, yeah. It's something about, if you repeat a mistake over and over and you stay in the same place,
Uh,
are you like, what are you doing? It really stuck with me, and I'm like, okay, no. I think this was actually a very powerful decision on my end, for me to be like, this is not serving me, and being scared of what is going to be, what's going to come in the future, but embracing that fear as part of the growth. Because whenever you make a very hard change in your life, there's a lot of uncertainty coming up. Maybe you'll be there for a year, 2 years, and you have to expect that uncertainty, not be afraid of it, and just jump into it, live through it, and then when you come out on the other side, it's actually really, really great. I actually have a very interesting example of this. So when a house is on fire, and someone is stuck on the balcony, for example, and the firefighters are like, come down, jump. And the person's just standing full of fear. They're comfortable where they're standing, even though they know there's fire behind them and it's going to engulf them. But they freeze. It's so hard for them to get out and know that, yeah, they can jump and it might look like it'll hurt, but once they land and they're saved by the firefighters, it's actually going to be great, that they'll be alive for the rest of their lives. And I think that's the advice that I would give, that it feels like your level, where you are right now, is all you can see and is your comfort, but once you jump, you'll see the other side, and it's actually great. That was a
Oh,
long-winded
that's a
answer.
beautiful. Yeah, but it was a
Super.
great way to wrap it up. It was a great way to wrap that story. Well, and thank you for sharing it too. That advice is
Yes.
obviously quite deep, meaningful advice, and I think our listeners will really relish that bit of advice. And my key takeaway there is, if something's not serving us, is it time for us to let it go? So that's
Yes.
a really great insight. Noel, this has been an amazing conversation, and thank you for being so real, open, and honest with us. And it's nice to know that you're human. Like it's because your online presence really you're so
Humanity
successful, and
affirmed.
yeah, so much. I think for our listeners, they would probably look at your presence and the work that you do and feel as though it's somewhat unattainable. But thanks for giving us a lot of the insights as to what happens behind the scenes and the journey. I feel as though that's really, really fantastic. And there's going to be so many key takeaways for our listeners. If our listeners aren't already sort of following your work and are across what you do, where would be the best place for them to sort of follow along?
Yeah, I think the best place is Instagram, because that's where I am most of the time. So at the Brain Coach, if there's anything that's happening, it's always in the link in my bio there. So everything is just on Instagram, and all my posts are there. So yeah, thank you so much. I feel like this was a very wholesome conversation, and it gave me a bit to reflect on too, actually. So these, this is not something I talk about as much on podcasts as mental health related topics and so on. So this is actually really nice to discuss.
Oh, that is so wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. At The Brain Coach, and of course, we will link to your Instagram and your website, and everything else we'll find in the show notes as well. Nawal, as Karen said, it's been such a pleasure and an honor speaking with you. I also feel as though this was such a beautiful and raw and authentic conversation. So thank you so much for your time, and all the best for your dissertation and everything else you're going to do in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, that's a wrap on another incredibly fun conversation here. I don't know about you, Michael, but I've taken plenty of notes here. Actually, I think I spotted you taking quite a few notes in today's conversation. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's not just me that does this. But, I mean, in fairness, there was plenty of great points that were mentioned, lots of things that were of interest. And I know both of us, I think, really hooked into that story at the end when Nawal was telling us about the fire story. I don't know if we maybe want to start there. I was sort of reading the room. I was like, oh, I think we both like this one.
Yeah, I like it so much because I think it's so representative of what so many people do in their lives, is that whole idea of, you've got this fire behind you and there is this potential of a better reality if you just take that leap. But it's just, there's so much research to show that humans, unfortunately, tend to choose misery over uncertainty when they are given a choice. So we prefer to remain in familiar situations, even if we're unhappy in those circumstances, rather than embracing uncertainty and having, the potential of a better future. And it drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right? Like people. Like I've been there, right? I'm sure you have as well, right? And sometimes it is hard to like make that jump and take that leap and go, oh, okay, things could be a bit better on the other side. Using the fire story, you need to jump off the balcony, right? But I would say 9 times out of 10, it generally is. And it's, it's that notion of, the grass is always green on the other side. Well, grass is generally greener where we choose to water it. And if we're happy to take that leap, and we water that grass, well, then, good things can come in that space. But yeah, I really love that story. It resonated so deeply, and I was just like relating it back to all these little moments in my life where it was like, where I did take the jump and where I didn't take the jump. And I think, it is very easy to default to that misery that you're talking about there.
It is, and I think it's just so important for people to know about this. And I catch myself so often, even just within conversations with my friends, they must really get sick of me. But, where just highlight those errors in their thinking. We all have those errors in our thinking, and they really are cognitive biases, that we have this loss aversion, or we have this fear of the unknown, or, Or we think that we might just regret if we jump. What if we regret? But research shows so clearly that most of the time what we regret is when we don't take action. If we take action, at least we'll know the outcome. But if we never try, that is what will haunt us, even on our deathbed. So I've become such a fan of just taking the leap and just trying. And it's almost like a pact I've made with myself, and I'm so much happier for it.
Yeah, and I love that that's a little pact, and I can almost tell. Well, I can tell there's a conviction in the way that you say that. Like you really hold yourself to account with that, which I really love, and I think that's probably a good thing for our listeners to take away too. It's like, we do need to have a bit of an internal dialogue where we do encourage ourselves to take that leap more often than not, because just as you mentioned there, you always hear those stories of people on their deathbeds talking about things that they regret not doing. Very rarely are they saying, oh, well, I gave this experience a go and it didn't turn out, and geez, I really regret that, right? Like, because generally there's learning that comes from that, when things don't work out. Which goes back to some of those conversations in like season 1 where we were talking about trial and error. Daria was talking about that notion of, we've got to try new things and like see if they work, and if they don't work, well then we move on and we adapt. from there.
Exactly. So we're still better off for it. Yeah. And I think the other thing that really helps me, to remember that and feel encouraged to just take action, even when I think, this is going to be hard, is a phenomenon we know as immune neglect in psychology or in positive psychology. So immune neglect is a special case of affective forecasting. So affective forecasting is basically the process of predicting how future events will affect our emotional state. So we make predictions all the time, right? Our brains are quite complex. So we think, all right, if I go through this, if I quit this job, or if I start my business, or if I get divorced, or if I move interstate or intercountry or whatever, this is how I am going to feel. We know from research that we're not very good at predicting this accurately. And part of that means that we tend to underestimate our own strength and resilience to go through tough stuff. So, you're just talking about those things, trying to start your own business or going through a separation or leaving things behind and, moving to a different country. We tend to underestimate how resilient we really are to deal with those things. Or even, things that are completely outside our control, like perhaps losing a loved one in the future. We think if that happens, we will never be able to cope. Well, research shows that we tend to cope a lot better than we think we will. So just keeping that in the back of your mind to really, gather all your courage to try that thing, I think is so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was wondering, have you got any tips that you'd like to throw our listeners' way as to how they can, work to sort of combat this, it's almost the negative voices that are in our heads around predicting our future, really. Like, you got anything in your toolkit that our listeners might be interested in?
Yeah, I think what is so important is to actually recognize this in the first place. And I know this all sounds so, cheesy or whatever, and we hear it all the time, but it is so important. And again, I said, I have conversations like these, with my coaching clients, but also with my friends and with my loved ones all the time, where they don't separate that whole idea of, future event from how they think it's going to impact them. They take it as a reality, as a given. Don't, just challenge that. Just notice that you're making this assumption that there's no way you're going to be able to cope with this in the future. You think of this future event and you think it's going to destroy you. Challenge that. Challenge that. And just think for a moment, what if that isn't the case? And keep in the back of your mind, research shows that we tend to be a lot more resilient than we really are. So what if it weren't like that? So really notice when you make those assumptions and then challenge them. And then see what you would do if your assumption was wrong.
I love that. And well, Ed, just to hit your point there on the head, I love that, and I think how blessed are your friends and your clients to have you in their lives, because I think it's also really beneficial if we're surrounded by people that help us challenge those narratives as well. Yeah. And no surprises that, when we're surrounded by those people, we may be encouraged to think a little bit differently. So I think that's really beautiful. Well, one of the things for me, and then to answer your question, is coming back to meditation and the practice of regular mantras. We were speaking a little bit earlier, not in this conversation, but just you and I was chatting, and I was speaking about my recent love or rediscovery of Kristen Neff's work around self-compassion. And one of the things that she talks a lot about is meditation, and it's something that I've grappled with at different times in my life when I've been able to do it really well and haven't been able to do it well at other times. She's got this beautiful quote that I've just pulled up because I thought our listeners might really like it, and it actually leans into this really nicely. And it says, when we make meditation enjoyable, it nourishes and comforts us. It becomes a way of meeting our needs and reinforces a sense of sufficiency and wholeness. So in other words, it builds a muscle of self-compassion. And then she goes on, and one of the great things about Kristen's work is she often adds a bit of commentary to her work or her quotes as well. And she says here that, there's a bit of a spoiler. You don't need to meditate to practice self-compassion, but meditating is a soothing practice. So like other things like affectionate breathing, it can actually be really good to help us train our brains to respond with kindness in the moments that we need it the most. So I think that's something that I like to do here. And, I've got a couple of mantras that I like to run through to help reinforce the behaviors that I like to see throughout my day. It's almost like the expectations that I have of myself throughout the day help me out. It's just little things like you're strong, you're kind, even little things like you got this, right? So I use those mantras to help me challenge these narratives when they do creep in. And I would say with varying degrees of success, it's still a work in progress though.
Oh, but aren't we always a work in progress? And I absolutely love that you're sharing this, and and just thinking back to some of the conversations again that we've had in season 1. I mean, Aaron Tate, wasn't it, who said he's got all these post-it notes, basically of mantras. You can figure this out. I think was more or less one of them. But
that's
what
right.
I love, Christy Neff, and I'm such a fan of her work as well. And I tell you what, self-compassion, the whole idea of self-compassion, I don't know where it was for the greater part of my life, but it has changed my life for the better so much. And you know how in the beginning I spoke about all these cognitive biases or errors in our thinking that we have. So for example, that whole idea of immune neglect and so forth. So according to Christine Neff, self-compassion has 3 elements. Is that awareness or the mindfulness? So that's just noticing, right? Noticing what comes up for you, maybe in those moments where you don't perform as well as you would have liked to, and without judging it, just noticing it. The second one is self-kindness. So thinking, what can I do to actually support myself? And the third one here, and this is also what distinguishes self-compassion from self-pity, is the element of common humanity. Recognizing that what I'm going through is not just me. Why am I always the only one who, stuffs up or is doing it so tough? But that we all go through these things. And I think, this ties back so nicely to that whole idea of immune neglect and all these cognitive errors, because we all have them. As human beings, we are so flawed in the way we think, in the way we process information to then inform our decision making and so forth. We all stuff up all the time. It is okay. And just to recognize that, I think is so, almost encouraging, isn't it? Because it's not us who's stuffing up. It's almost like our DNA.
Yeah, that's right. And I often put it this way, I have a dear friend and I, we check in quite regularly on a lot of different projects that we've got going on in our lives. And we often reflect on just society as a whole. We have, very deep conversations around, what could be improved. But we keep on coming back to this notion that we find really challenging, is that everybody is doing the best job that they can with the tools that they've got. When you reframe your thinking like that, it's like, oh, that's incredible. And you see people that might be struggling with mental health or even physical health or other elements of our lives, right? And it's just like, maybe that person just doesn't have the toolkit yet. And to your point here, when we grow an awareness around self-compassion, we can actually lean into that toolkit to just take a moment to pull ourselves up, or just check in with ourselves when things maybe aren't going as well. But you got to have that toolkit, right? You got to have that awareness to be able to pull yourself up first, and then maybe cognitively reframe our thinking in a way that's more positive, that's going to work towards jumping off that balcony into that brighter and better future. So
Yeah, exactly. And, I just love, because so many people think that if they're hard on themselves, it's going to, elevate their standards or something like that. Research shows so clearly that the opposite is the case. When we are actually self-compassionate, we perform a lot better. And I think one of the reasons why that is because self-compassion is that's the moment where we approach ourselves. We actually look at ourselves, we actually dare to see what is going wrong, what is getting in our way, and we make an effort to address it. Whereas self-criticism is just judgmental, right? Isn't it? It's just we label ourselves and we turn away and we make ourselves smaller than we really are. And that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I must admit, I love this part of like my coaching. I do a lot of the work in like the PsyCap hero coaching model, and when we lean into the efficacy part, it's amazing when people have that moment of realization when they're like, oh my gosh, I have actually done so much. There's so much for me to be proud of, and like I can actually achieve so much more based on what I have done. And that's where I often link in a bit of self-compassion in that space as well, because it's kind of like, we're actually doing all right. It is important to have those moments of reflection.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And maybe before we wrap up, because mindful of time, but I want to dare you now, I want to challenge you to bring up PsyCap and Hero again in a future episode and explain what they actually are, because they're amazing tools. But I guess they would go beyond our time today. So...
All right, we'll endeavour to do that. That sounds good. And look, today's conversation, was an amazing one. Nawal's an incredible human being and is doing some amazing work, and can't wait to see how her career continues to progress. She's obviously provided us with lots to think about and given us a pretty fruitful wrap-up to this episode. We spoke a lot about Kristen Neff's work around self-compassion. If you're interested in her work, feel free to have a look at her website. She's got some great resources on there that help build that toolkit that we're speaking about here. But for now, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode and all those in this season. If you haven't listened to the great episodes that we spoke about from this one in season 1, go back and check them out. Some great stuff there from Daria and Aaron. But for now, take care.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite. To let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realize your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate, and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.